Okay, so this is a lesson for lethal alleles. So after learning about the three different types of inheritance pattern, we're now moving on to not just looking at inheritance pattern, but also the types of alleles out there. So lethal alleles basically refer to an allele that can kill you, right? They're basically results of genetic mutations that could damage the growth or damage the development of an organism. And there are different ways that the allele can be lethal. They can either be recessive, they can be dominant, or they can be conditional depending on the gene and what the gene is involved in. So there we go. There are three classifications of alleles: recessive lethal alleles, dominant lethal alleles, or conditional lethal alleles. Now let's look at the first one, recessive lethal alleles. So recessive lethal alleles, they are alleles that would only cause you to die if you inherit two of them in your genotype. So you must get two lethal alleles to get yourself killed. And one of the example would be this agouti gene in mice, in rodents. So what happened is you have this genetic mutation in the mice where you can cause a buildup of certain stuff of a melanin or the absence of a melanin. And then what happened is that it can affect the coat color of the mice. So if you have the normal allele is the big A with nothing on top, then you're a normal survivor. However, if you carry the allele AY, then it causes you to carry this lethal allele, and you get a little bit of effect to your body, but it doesn't cause you to die. And that mice is going to get a yellow coat color. However, if you inherit two of the AY allele, the mice will actually die as an embryo and it will never be born in the first place. Now, here's something funny about the genetic genotype and phenotype ratios that you need to consider. When we talk about recessive lethal alleles and we're predicting the phenotype or the genotype of the offsprings needs to be born for them to be considered. So when you're writing out your ratios, you're actually going to disregard this box right here, the box that dies as embryos, and you only consider the survivors. So that's why if you look back at the bottom, you can see that the phenotype for this mice, for the prediction, would be 2 to 1, because you're only looking at the boxes that managed to survive and be born. Next one, we have dominant lethal alleles, where you have a lethal allele that would kill you if you only get one copy, right? Doesn't matter if you inherited both or just inherited one of them, you'll just be dead, all right? And here's a thing about the dominant lethal allele. Since inheriting one copy is going to cause death, then how does this allele even get passed down to generation? So I want you to pause that and I want you to try and answer this question in the dominant lethal allele session. If inheriting one would kill you, how does it pass down to generation? Now, I trust that you've had to think about it. And the answer is, for a dominant lethal allele to be passed down to generation, it must only show its lethal effect after the individual has reached sexual maturity. So in that case, if the onset is after sexual maturity, the individual with the dominant lethal allele had the chance to mate and produce the next generation before he or she dies from it. And there is a human example for this, and that is called the Huntington disease. So the Huntington disease is basically a genetic mutation where it affects the neurons and the nerve cells in the brain. And you can see that on the left-hand side is a Huntington disease brain, On the right-hand side is a normal brain. And you can see that loss of neurons or loss of nerve tissues. And there are symptoms associated with not being able to control the different parts of your body. And the age of onset for Huntington disease is usually around age of 30 to 50 years old, where the individual had a chance to get married and had the ability to produce the next generation. And this is the reason why this lethal allele actually stayed in the human population despite it being a dominant allele. And then next, we have conditional lethal alleles, where alleles are only fatal in responses to some environmental factors. And one of the example would be a allergy to fava beans. So basically, the individual is normal unless it comes across the allergic items, which could potentially kill them, all right? And so therefore, this kind of lethal alleles it's also able to pass down the generation. So what I want you to do now is work through this practice question on, almost gave it away. Yeah, just work through it and that's it. Thank you.